Well, welcome. We are thrilled to have you here for our information session for the University of Chicago Leadership and Society Initiative, where your next chapter matters. We are going to have a 5-part agenda in the hour ahead. We will briefly hear a welcome from the speakers and their backgrounds with LSI. We will then present a snapshot of the initiative and the fellowship experience. We'll go through the learning journey. We'll talk about the timeline and details for those who want to become candidates, and then we will engage in Q&A. But let us start with a welcome. You have among us 2 LSI Fellows who have recently completed this extraordinary journey, and the executive director of LSI. And so I'm going to take down my screen and I'm going to have each of them share who they are. But before we get there, I should share that I'm Seth Green. I'm the dean of the Graham School, and we have the utter privilege of being the operational home of the University of Chicago Leadership and Society Initiative. This is an initiative that involves every school and division of the university, but as the home for lifelong learning, we are also the collaborative home for the initiative, and it means we have the incredible joy of having Diana Petty, who is a visionary leader, sit on our team alongside the rest of her LSI staff. And so, Diana, can I turn it over to you to share a little bit about your background, and then we'll come to Matt Brooks and Alice Davison, who are fellows who have just completed their year on campus, although they are not done being fellows, because as you'll hear, you are a fellow for good in both meanings of that term. Diana, let's start with you. Oh, and I need to allow you to unmute. I'm so sorry. That is a totally a big mistake on my end. Go for it. Now you should be able to actually share who you are.
I can admit with pride that though we've done many info sessions, this is the first time that's happened. So I'll take the win there. But thank you, Seth, and thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us on this Tuesday morning. As Seth mentioned, I have the extraordinary privilege of being the executive director of LSI. I've been in this role for 3 years, at the University of Chicago for 7, but actually spent the first part and the lion's share of my career in and around city government in New York. So I worked in the Bloomberg administration doing civic tech initiatives and public-private partnership building. And really the through line for me while I was there, and the vantage point that I bring when I think about leadership for society, really is, the opportunity to activate leaders towards some of the most pressing social, economic, and environmental needs of our time. I was very fortunate to be involved in several civic leadership development programs that aimed at helping mission-driven leaders optimize impact in communities that they were already serving. And I got really interested in the role that specifically academic institutions and higher education can play in catalyzing leaders in these new and innovative ways. So I pinch myself every day that I get to be a part of this, and I'm looking forward to talking with you all further.
And now we're going to come to our fellows. Matt, can you share a little bit about your background and then what brought you to LSI?
Yes, thanks for the opportunity to be here, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt Brooks. As Seth mentioned, as of about 60 days ago, I completed the LSI Fellowship, which, as you'll hear over the course of the next hour, was an absolutely transformative experience for me. How I got there, I was a military officer for the first part of my professional life. I served for 22 years in the United States Air Force, but upon retirement, had always had an itch and a desire to become an entrepreneur. And so I became an entrepreneur. I acquired a small business in Florida, ultimately ran that business for a number of years, and then just a couple of years ago, sold that business to a strategic acquirer. And so very quickly, I think at what I would consider a fairly youthful age, I found myself out of a job but plenty of professional runway left, and figured and knew that I wanted to do something more purposeful with the rest of my professional life. And so out of a stroke of good luck, I did a quick Google search for essentially fellowship programs for transitioning executives or something like that, and found the University of Chicago LSI program. As I mentioned, I reside in Tampa, Florida, and so I relocated to Chicago for the year, had an apartment downtown, and went to school for a year. And it was unbelievable experience and look forward to sharing a little bit more about that with you.
Wonderful. And we'll also talk about what Matt's up to now in a bit, which
Yeah.
is really inspiring with Second Echelon, but I'll let him tell more. And Alice, can we hear your story? What
Yes,
is your
of
background and how
course.
did you find LSI?
Sure. It's nice to be with you all, and it's lovely to see you, Matt, Diana, and Seth. It's a reminder of how wonderful our time together was. I live in Summit, New Jersey, just outside of New York City, and in two years ago, now I can't even remember when it was. 2 years ago, I retired from a nearly 40-year career where ultimately I led talent for the investment organization as part of the Capital Group American Funds. I worked for the same company for 40 years. I loved it. I loved the people. I loved the interaction. And honestly, I liked a lot of the learning that sort of happened by osmosis in a dynamic, progressive organization involved in capital markets and economies around the world. When I retired, which I was delighted to do, I had a list sort of as long as my arm of things that I knew that I was missing. And it took me the better part of a year to get through those. Time with family, more dedication to my nonprofits, some travel that we put off, etc. But I too knew that I wanted to have a second chapter. And I also knew that I was going to have to be more deliberate about my learning. It wasn't going to come to me every day the way that it had in my professional life. So I explored some really interesting online learning, which I loved. But I realized that I didn't want to learn online. I wanted to learn in community with and in an academic setting. And that sort of narrows the list when you honestly, when you're not looking for a terminal degree. So like Matt, I tippy tapped around online. I found a handful of programs, and I was really drawn to the name of the program at Chicago and the potential to really pivot towards an impact on society. So not unlike Matt, Howard, and I and our two naughty French bulldogs moved to Hyde Park, where we spent 9 months in bliss last year. It really was it was a wonderful experience, and I got everything I was looking for from a learning and a pivot and a community environment.
Great. Well, we are going to come back to Matt and Alice and Diana throughout this conversation. But I want to start by actually running you through a snapshot of LSI so that you have a sense of this initiative as we then come back to have conversation with them about it. And so you probably know this if you're on this information session. This is a fellowship designed to support distinguished leaders, people who have immense accomplishment, who nonetheless want to pursue meaningful new directions and next chapters. And we say for themselves, they have an inner goal. They want a certain purpose or wellness, and for society, they also have a sense that their meaning will depend on contributing to a greater good. And so the way we came to this as a university is twofold. The first is that individuals, particularly with certain education and income, are living dramatically longer. And what we see in the data is that individuals who would be eligible for LSI, if they're reaching 60 with the type of experience that is required for the fellowship, they are very likely, based on what we see in health data, to reach 90 or beyond. And what's interesting is that people are still finishing their long-standing careers around the same time. The data actually suggests a little earlier because of the dynamism of the economy and because of certain roles having even greater wealth accumulation and independence. And yet at the same time, it's now realistic that individuals who are potentially finishing a long-standing career around 60 have generative capabilities that will go for another 3 decades. And so part one of this story is there is a whole nother chapter that is possible. And the second part of this story is that we need these individuals in society to be activated on the issues that matter. As our world has grown more complex, there is a real need for experienced talent. If you think about climate change, if you think about how do we build the capabilities to embrace AI while managing and regulating it. If you think about how do we navigate the many aspects of a complex democracy amidst a sea of information. So we can go on down the list. These are challenges where leadership is essential. And we believe that these individuals who have this immense accomplishment and many decades potentially still remaining to be generative could contribute very meaningfully to these important societal issues. And our goal at the University of Chicago is to be at the intersection of translating that accomplished leadership into talent for society. And so we want to support the journeys of these executives who want that off ramp from one longstanding career arc into an on ramp for another meaningful chapter. And we want to activate that leadership for society, harnessing the power of our intellectual tools. So that's the why behind LSI. And now I want to talk a little bit about the how. And the way I thought I would do this is by describing the vision for the end of the fellowship, where we want individuals who are going to finish the fellowship to be, and Matt and Alice will talk about their examples, is where they have really found what motivates them, that why, based on their values and purpose, where they have a sense of what type of topic they want to impact, that societal issue that wakes them up, much like their job might have, to say, here's my purpose for the day, here's how I want to contribute, and then to really identify specific pathways. And we'll talk later about the different motifs we see as a fellowship now here for 2 years with 2 cohorts across the different ways that people are setting up everything from next acts, like Matt will talk about, where you're building a whole new firm, all the way over to portfolio lives, where people are getting involved in boards and having encore chapters of leadership. So with that, I want to take down my screen and we're going to return to Diana, Matt, and Alice. And Matt and Alice, I want to start with you. We just talked about ending the LSI Fellowship with a vision for the future. I was hoping each of you could share a brief snapshot of your current vision for your next chapter and how LSI helped you get there. And Matt, maybe can we start with you again?
Yeah, sure thing, Seth. So I'll take you back to September 2024, which is when I essentially arrived at LSI. I arrived knowing that I had a passion for military veterans and a passion for entrepreneurship. But I also, candidly felt like a lot of that ground had been essentially plowed by folks who have come before me. There's a lot of work going on in the veteran space. There's a lot of work in the veteran entrepreneurship space. And what was amazing about LSI is that very quickly I was encouraged, cajoled, convinced that I could still make an impact in that space. And that was like something that really gave me the confidence to do something within the veteran entrepreneur space. I was paired with a distinguished mentor who happened to be 4 years my junior, who also is a veteran, but has built multiple nationwide nonprofits in the veteran entrepreneurship space. And Todd Connor, who's now a close personal friend of mine, also encouraged me to give it a go. Within the bounds of like how, as Seth mentioned, how I wanted to build my next chapter. And so through all of that and much more discussion than we have time for, I essentially built an investment firm called Second Echelon Capital that invests in military veterans who are owning and operating small businesses. Essentially, the firm takes a minority interest in that firm and serves in as an advisor. And as the name implies, the military veteran entrepreneur is the first echelon in that effort. I launched that initiative in April of this year. I've made 3 investments in military-owned and led businesses. And ultimately, my dream is to build that out and really create like a space where I can change the lives of 10 to 15 military veterans who want to to achieve economic empowerment through entrepreneurship. And so I'm super excited about that. Everything currently is I'm self-funding all of these deals. I'm learning a lot about private equity, venture capital, private debt, private credit. I camped out at the University of Chicago School of Business, Booth School of Business, for the better part of the 9 months there, and had my own table that I would spend a lot of time just kind of poring over these concepts. But all things I learned at University of Chicago gave me the confidence to launch this venture, and super excited about that. We'll see where it goes. Right now, things are off to a great start, and looking forward to continuing to build that out.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you for your service twice over, because
Thanks,
now I'm serving those who have served. And Alice, can we come to you and hear your example? And we wanted to pair these in some ways because I think they represent some of the spectrum of possibilities that we see across the fellowship. And yeah, I'll let you share more, Alice.
Matt, I'm blown away by what Matt is doing. I just need to say that again out loud. It's fun. And I think you had two when I last saw you. So now you have another one, another investment, which is phenomenal. Slightly differently from Matt, I came to LSI with, I would say, a couple of, and I think the spectrum that you're talking about, Seth, is people come in with no idea. People can come in with a very specific idea. And I would put myself somewhere in the middle in that I had several ideas. Mostly they were ideas that I had spent time on, either in my professional or in my board service. And so I was very interested in the topic of women in investing. I was very interested in the topic of access to college, starting largely in middle school. And in my online learning, I had discovered the science of happiness, which turns out to be applied positive psych. And that was not that was sort of new in the last 20 years, actually. So I hadn't had a positive psychology in any of my undergrad work. So I came in with a couple of ideas in my hip pocket. It was actually in the winter quarter where the program encourages us and provides us with the tools to do what I would say is sort of a deep dive research. And you really are in this phenomenal academic environment. You've got colleagues, you've got resources, you've got libraries, professors, your audit classes, et cetera. And it was in the winter quarter that I started to explore a little bit more around happiness, and actually sort of I'm going to say the antidote. There's a lot of work around loneliness that was done at the University of Chicago. As it turns out, they've got phenomenally deep resources, and loneliness and its antidote, social connections, really grabbed my attention. So I focused there for my literature review and the research that I did in the winter. And my interest is now related, but I would say really a pivot in terms of what I came in with, shaped largely, I'd say, by a lot of the academic resources and contacts that the program was able to provide. So I'm interested in the role that social connections play in healthy aging, and in particular, rescripting in a couple of key, sort of along a couple of key paths, intermediaries, as Diana and I would call them, employers, financial advisors, wellness programs, and insurance companies. So to have those four intermediaries rescript what is sort of outdated language and conversations around how you retire well, and wanting to make sure that there's an opportunity to talk about the important role that connection with each other plays in our longer lives, as Seth mentioned. So that's something that I've been working on. I'm doing deeper work on it this year, and there's a lot of interest, as it turns out, and I draw very heavily on the connections, the professors, and the contacts that I made at the university.
Great, thank you, Alice. And so Matt and Alice represent two examples of purpose plans, and there are now 42 of those, and I think there are now 42 different variations given how customized. And so Diana, I want to come to you and ask, you've seen all 42 plans. Can you just describe the spectrum a bit and lay out the different ways people have handled their purpose planning over the years?
I want to preface this with a little bit for our audience about what unifies LSI Fellows. And there's kind of three characteristics that we've seen across everyone who has come through the initiative so far. The first is that they come to us at some form of inflection points that looks a lot of different ways and takes a lot of different shapes, but they're in a moment of really meaningfully readiness for going into what their next chapter could be. The second is that they are meaningfully motivated by translating their capabilities in service of leaving the world a little better than they found it. And then finally, they possess a high degree of intellectual curiosity, and they're looking, Alice mentioned this, they're looking for a space to learn in community, to think about new ideas, to understand kind of cutting edge innovations and research that might improve, their future leadership. But beyond those three dimensions, LSI Fellows are diverse in essentially every other measure you might imagine, both in terms of their past experience and their expertise that they bring into the learning process, but also how they're conceiving of what the future may hold from them. So by virtue of that, it's no surprise that we've seen a really wide continuum of different purpose plans that we see bookended by what we call an outside-in approach and an inside-out approach. And what we mean by that is we've seen, some fellows leave really focused on a specific issue area that is animating this next stage of their leadership, whether that's violence prevention or food insecurity or bolstering democracy. I mean, again, those domain areas run very wide ranging, but that it is that issue and being able to offer some form of contribution that is really shaping their decisions and kind of focusing their priorities as they move forward. On the other end of the spectrum, we had a lot of fellows, their big epiphanies throughout the year were more, if I can reinvest in my own wisdom, if I can bring it out in new and intentional ways, that will situate me to be the most impactful leader that I can be at this stage. And so those folks are thinking about writing and publishing or teaching or mentorship. And then we have people doing everything in between or kind of blends of those things. It's certainly, again, very wide ranging. And the other last point I want to mention is one of scale. We've also seen a lot of variety in terms of the kind of scale of impact that fellows are driven by. And so we certainly have some who are thinking big systems change, right? Policy advocacy around investment in funding for women's health research, or reforming how we teach literacy in public schools in the US, or changing the face of workforce development in Lagos, Nigeria, right? It really kind of big, substantial things. But we also have fellows leave who think, you know what, I'm going to change the life of 3 small business owners in my neighborhood, or I'm really going to deeply invest in, something that is much more place-based, that is in my community. And for us, we are not prescriptive about what societal contribution looks like. We are here to help fellows discern that for themselves and provide them with a really multifaceted learning process so that they can be again, kind of set up for dynamism at this stage in whatever pathway that they determine. And so we see all of that as being critical and necessary and meaningful representations of their leadership.
Well, thank you, Matt, Diana, and Alice. I'm going to come back to all of you shortly, but what I now want to do is I want to walk everyone through the journey that leads to the purpose plans that you just heard about. And so I will start with the 3 pillars that are the foundation of every LSI fellowship. The first is to know oneself. And that is really about, at this stage of your life, when you're hitting this inflection point, who are you? What are those values that motivate you? And what do you want to contribute in this next chapter thematically? And we are very University of Chicago in this program, meaning we believe passionately in the liberal arts and in the power of great books and how people across time and space, from Aristotle and Plato to today, have answered these questions. And our view is one of the best ways for you to get in touch with that inner journey at a time of inflection is to read how people across all time have looked at these questions, because even though the world has changed markedly, human nature has not. And there are certain core assumptions that are kind of embedded in people's journey that we think these books help to tease out. And so we have our best faculty. We also have brought on people from outside the university, like David Brooks, who lead a curriculum where you're reading things like Man's Search for Meaning, and you're thinking deeply about who are you and how do you want to contribute to the world at this stage of life. The second pillar is understand the world. And I think this is a really interesting approach to big societal issues. We believe at the University of Chicago in diversity of viewpoint. And we are passionate that you should see many different lenses on the same topic and then make your own decision about how to understand that issue. And so what we do in this is we bring many different lenses to the same topics. And our goal is not just to help you understand gun violence or climate or how to think about capitalism and how to harness its power. It's also to help you to think about how you would look at an issue from an economist lens, from a sociological lens, from an anthropological lens, and to give you all of that tool. And the reason is that for many people that reach this stage, you may be coming, for example, from business and from a certain lane. Maybe you're in investing, maybe you're in accounting, maybe you're in consulting. And now you want to be involved in these societal issues, and you're going to interact with people that are coming from the social sector or the government or other places. And what we find is people don't usually totally change their point of view. So if you walk into this program with an economist lens, you'll probably leave with a somewhat similar lens. But you'll now know how a sociologist or an anthropologist or a policy leader will view that same issue. And so you'll hear, for example, let's take gun violence. We have an economist who runs our crime lab. He has one set of views, and he uses data quantitatively, and he says, look, if you prosecute, crime goes down. Then you'll hear from a sociologist here who won a MacArthur Genius Award and wrote a qualitatively stunning book on the vicious cycle of recidivism and how you can have prosecution lead to this, kind of loop of kind of challenges. And to be clear, at the University of Chicago, we don't tell you the right answer. But what you get is you get all of these different perspectives. And then when you leave here, you're able to engage with people on all of these issues much more fluently because you have your view, but now you understand where everyone's coming from and you have all of these different modes of analysis. So part two is, how do you understand the issues that you may want to work on in this next chapter from many different vantage points? And then part three is envision the future. And this one is actually beyond our Nobel Prize winning faculty. We bring people in who have applied leadership in this next chapter to teach about all of the different possibilities that you may want to engage in. So how do you have board leadership? How do you start a new venture that matters to you? How do you engage in strategic philanthropy? How do you think about community engaged work? How do you think about how to pivot into a next act? And the people that are teaching this are leaders of the board and CEO practice at major search firms like Russell Reynolds and Heidrick and Struggles, or people that have served in the highest levels, or people that have started their own next chapter ventures and now teach about it. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to have you think deeply inside, have you look at the world, and then find the intersection of where your inner purpose meets that need in the world in an actionable way by giving you a bit of a roadmap. And so that is what is happening in the curriculum. And to customize it, we then have 3 advisors that are helping you to develop the plan that comes out of it. A coach who's really working with you and is yours for your purposes and conversations. A mentor who is someone who is typically 3 to 5 years further on this journey. And so you heard Matt say his mentor was actually younger than him. What it meant to be 3 to 5 years in the journey is he had created a number of specific ventures on a national level for veterans. And so we knew Matt was interested in that direction. And so we wanted someone who was already years into it to help him think about, if you want to go in this direction, what does the field look like? Where are there gaps? How can you, given your talents, contribute? And then finally, an academic advisor. And they are really helping you to think about what is the big idea that you want to work on. And from an academic perspective, how would you investigate that? So you heard Alice talk about really looking into the research on social isolation and thinking about these 4 institutions that play a big role in retirement and how they could play a more meaningful role. And so what she's bringing now, she has 40 years of industry experience, is she's now bringing a really solid batch of academic research to these institutions to help them think about how they can better serve their clients by thinking seriously about connection in this retirement phase. So that is the Next Chapter advisors. And then the most important piece of the program is the cohort. These are the beautiful people that are the 42 fellows to date. And what we hear, even though we love our faculty and we know the difference they make every time we survey, is that the number one value of the fellowship is the peers that you are on this journey with, because you're going through a very meaningful life event, and to have 21 others who are going through that, but coming from a different set of lived experiences and have a different set of ideas, really opens up the world of possibilities, even at the level of direct application, where many of the fellows are working together on Next Chapter ventures and have actually helped each other move into their next acts in terms of board leadership or corporate boards or other opportunities. And then I'll just finally close by saying that this is not just an opportunity for you, that we know that this is something that some individuals want to go on a journey with their partner, and we're happy to talk about what this looks like in greater detail, but accompanying partners are invited throughout the year-long experience so that we can make this as meaningful, not only to you, but to your family as you go through this discernment process. All right, with that, I'm going to take down my screen and I'm going to come back to our incredible discussants. Diana, I want to start with you this time. I just presented a lot on LSI and its elements. What do you see as the greatest strengths of the experience, if you had to call out a couple?
Yeah, so I'll say in the 2 years we've run the program, the 3-part learning container that Seth just walked you through, we've seen that as a very effective and solid kind of premise and backbone and wrapper to this whole learning process. And having fellows who come in at a variety of different stages of their conception, we've seen that kind of 3-part experience move all of them meaningfully forward in their level of clarity and their level of confidence and readiness for what's next for them. But within that bigger 3-part container, there's been a couple of sweet spots that we've seen. The first is that the fellowship is built, around a shared learning journey with opportunities for individualization and customization. So the fellows spend a lot of time in what we refer to as the LSI core. That is a liberal arts style learning experience that's really aimed at helping them build a very multifaceted set of tools and methods that they can carry forward with them in their future leadership. But then they also have ample opportunities to gravitate towards specific areas that are most relevant to their learning objectives. And so we've seen that harmony between shared learning and customization to be very effective. The second sweet spot is a balance of what we refer to as the philosophical and the practical areas of learning, which is something that the University of Chicago, I would say, it's very core to its tradition and how we think about educational aims. And so the fellows spend time in very theoretically driven learning moments where the framing of the question is up for debate and there is no exploration of prescription of solutions. But then they also have a lot of opportunities to do more experiential, more practicum style experiences. So they're thinking about what really happens on the ground and how they might take those tools and apply them directly in their own contexts. And then the final thing, because I would be remiss if I didn't say it, and Seth mentioned the power of relationships and the cohort and being able to experience joy together is also something that over our development life cycle, we have learned to guard space more routinely. As some of you may know, the university's mantra, lovingly held, is where fun goes to die. And that speaks very directly to the serious with seriousness with which we take our academics and our scholarship and the rigor of learning here. And the fellows certainly experience that. But there is an increasing and growing body of evidence that suggests that, especially at this stage of life, the power of one's relationships and the quality of one's connections are equally important to good health outcomes as having a healthy diet. And so we really have tried to create space for fellows to build those bonds, those trusts. And, you know, Matt and Alice can correct me if they feel differently, but I anticipate there will be friendships for life out of both cohorts, and we certainly hope to foster that in future.
Thank you, Diana. And Matt and Alice, I want to come to you and hear about your experience. And let me start with just maybe a straightforward question, which is, what was it like to be back in class? Both of you had been out of class for a few decades, and you're coming back as fellows, but also as students and beginners again. Can you just talk about what that process was like and how you enjoyed your cohort and audited classes? And Matt, can we start with you?
Yeah. What was it like to be back in class? I would say it was overwhelming at times, and a little more physical than I expected. To be completely candid, I was not used to sitting for hours at a time, listening to other people talk. I was usually the one at the front of the room doing the talking. So it was, but all kidding aside, it was. It was just joyful, to be honest with you. Like I remember within a week of starting the program, I went back to Florida. I failed to mention that my wife and dog stayed in Tampa while I commuted to Chicago for the year. So I was a regular kind of weekend warrior where I'd pop back down to Florida and visit my family. But I got home and my wife looked at me and she goes, "Wow, you seem genuinely happy." And I was, and it was because of what I call, essentially the intellectual stimulation that Diana mentioned, and the importance of that. Things that, it had been 3 decades since I had been in a classroom, and just being a part of that, and the first day of school, like butterflies in your stomach, where you don't know where the classroom is and where to go, but then also just the interaction and the dialogue with my fellow cohort mates was just really something that enriched me greatly. But I even today, I miss being back in the classroom. It was such a great experience, and those times that we were all together, hearing from world-class faculty and discussing everything from the great books and, Aristotle and Plato to contemporary sociological issues, just really powerful and left a major impact on me.
Alice, same question to you, and then I'm going to add on just so we hear about all of these pieces. After you talk a little bit about the classroom, also hear about your experience with your next chapter advisors.
Great. Like Matt, well, I had a different physical my issue was walking up all the stairs to get to our classroom. But once we were there, imagine 22 people around a lovely oval table in one of the, I don't know if you can see my background, in this sort of Gothic building, which was where we had most of our core classes. And it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal because we looked forward to seeing each other there. A little bit to Matt's point, none of this is graded. None of it is required, but everybody shows up with something to contribute. Everybody is excited for the conversation, wants to make the kind of the dialogue deeper and the insights richer. And it really was remarkable to see a group of us as consistently sort of interested in on this work. I would echo what Matt said about the topics that were taught, the professors who were so well curated from around the university, and just the richness of our conversations. It's not super, like, for people who've done MBA. It's not executive Eddie. It's not kind of group projects. And there were a couple of those, but it really is about the collaboration and the learning that takes place in the classroom and outside. I was like an audit savant. I loved the audits. We can audit up to 2 a quarter, and many of us did at least one of those. I did a variety of undergrad and graduate audits. Professors are genuinely excited to see, adult learners in their classes. And it was really interesting and I think very helpful ultimately to learn with undergrads or to learn with students. They ask amazing questions. They're interested in your background. Like Matt, at least at the business school, there's an opportunity to engage with business school teams who might be working on projects that are adjacent to some of your interests. So I found like the learning experience was a really great introduction or really good exposure to the academic community. And the core of it is I think is the people around the table who made ours so rich. My next chapter advisors were phenomenal. I had a coach, the really interesting, younger than I, with a really interesting professional background. We probably spoke every month or so. And I'm keeping her as a private to do coaching. I thought she was phenomenal, very well connected to the program, but not embedded in it. She's a real coach who sits outside of the university, who was really helpful to me in my journey. My academic advisor, somebody who had done deep research on aging and memory, actually, a psychology professor, phenomenal. I'm in touch with him to this day. And my mentor was a really interesting woman who was very helpful about her journey, as Seth mentioned, which had happened, I'd say several years ago. She's very involved in foundation, having had a corporate leadership role, very involved in foundations and philanthropy. There's a whole core of mentors. So I happen to also be quite close to folks in that mentor population who might have been direct, mentors for somebody else in the program. So it's the Diana and her team and Seth also provided us with when you have an area of interest with a phenomenal sort of Rolodex of people who are available and interested to talk about your time at LSI, your interest, and to see what they can do to help. So those were also very important resources for me.
Well, thank you, Matt and Alice. I'll move us forward just in the interest of time and acknowledge one question I didn't have a chance to ask you about, but I'll just name, is that there is a whole life of the university that you take in as well. And so, we have incredible people. I know you all got Valerie Jarrett, lunch, and Larry Hogan lunch. I mean, just incredible people that come through, and we're grateful to be in a place where we have these intimate 20-person lunches with them. And then the Aspen Institute seminar, the study abroad, where you went a week in Paris and got a private tour of Versailles and had a musical concert there. So I will just put those out there with an inability for you to comment, although I see your smiles. And I will bring us back to the deck because we are going to share one more piece, because with great excitement, we have heard over the first 2 years of this initiative that the design pathway, which is what we're now referencing as the fellowship that Matt and Alice and everyone else to date have gone through, that it sounds amazing to move here for an entire year and immerse yourself. And it, for many, is also entirely unrealistic because you have other commitments and you can't move to Chicago, or you want to begin planning what's next while you still are in your core career, and you might be 3 to 5 years out, and you can't possibly take a 9-month sabbatical because you don't work in academia, and you really still want to go through this 3-part learning journey. And so after a lot of work with a steering committee led by people who had expressed interest in such a possibility, we are thrilled this spring to have announced that we will have a second pathway. So What you just heard about from Matt and Alice continues, and it's the design pathway. And we have a phenomenal cohort starting again this September that'll be immersed here for a full year. And in January of 2026 and each year thereafter, on the calendar year start, we will now have an Imagine pathway. And that is a pathway where you go through the same 3-part curriculum, but in a more compact form, and you do it through 4 4-day residencies, 1 each quarter, plus work in between. Although I want to emphasize, and Diana will share more, we're big believers in in-person learning. So those 4 4-day residencies, you're doing reading beforehand, you are being immersed during it, and then in between each of those, you're working with your coach and what we call your progress partners, a couple other peers, to really move your project and ideas forward in between. But it is not online learning in the sense that what we heard from people is they really value in-person community and the depth of being in a retreat-like setting. And then at the same time, they want to make progress in between. And if they're on Zoom with 1 person or 2 other people, they feel like that is meaningful and still allows them to continue to build relationships, even though they're not in the same place at the same time. With that, let me turn it over to Diana to go deeper into these 2, and then we will come to your questions immediately afterward. Go for it, Diana.
Thank you, Seth. So yeah, just to emphasize what Seth just shared, both pathways offer a structured and rigorous process for really reconnecting with your values at this stage of life, what is deeply motivating you, and bringing those things into sharper focus and ultimately actions as you step forward. And so the design pathway is immersive, where fellows have space for both kind of convergence of thinking and then ultimately, divergence of thinking, and then ultimately back to convergence as they test particular opportunities, particular ideas, and make some key decisions about where they're going to start their next chapter. The Imagine pathway, in contrast, is more curated, and it's further upstream in that visioning process to begin to survey possibilities, kind of shake the trees a little bit, gain some initial clarity on the direction you may want to go, and develop a more clear set of criteria for how you might prioritize your choices. And so what you see here on this slide, very brass tacks, the design pathway is 1 academic year, which is September through May, essentially on a full-time basis, though we have built in some flexibility and freedom to honor outside obligations from the fellowship. And then the Imagine pathway, as mentioned, runs 1 calendar year over 4 4-day retreats on campus in person, but with hybrid learning in between with your coach and a peer learning group. So next slide. And actually what I want to emphasize here are the ways in which these 2 pathways are more similar than where they are different. And what is distinct about them is the dosage of learning and engagement and exposure between them. So both pathways move through those 3 learning pillars we started with. They are both cohort-based, so you are on this journey alongside a group of purpose-driven peers. They include individualized coaching and supports, and they ultimately culminate in a capstone that brings into alignment, your superpowers and values, what really energizes you, and specific opportunities where you might be able to contribute to a societal need. And we'll talk more about that momentarily. So what looks different that you see here is that dosage of learning. And so the time in class varies in that the design pathway also offers more wraparound engagements, such as the Aspen Institute Executive Seminar and Travel Study, to take a global look at a specific societal issue. And then the flip side is that in the Imagine pathway, for those who are still footed in full-time commitments, but want to begin this process and are looking for some structure and some community to do so, they have a lot more flexibility to overlay their learning journey on top of their current chapter. So next slide. That final area where the dosage is different is in the capstone. And so we've been using this geography analogy of leaving the Imagine pathway with your compass that helps guide you in further exploration and discovery of future next chapter opportunities. Whereas in the design pathway, you leave with a roadmap where you've gotten to the point of identifying specific opportunities initial actions, partnerships that you plan to begin to step forward in activating your purposefulness and future desired impact. So that compass, the main focus is really on clarifying your intrinsic motivations. David Brooks, who has been an advisor and an instructor in the initiative, has been really influential in our thinking on this, in shifting from what he calls resume values to eulogy values. So what is really energizing and animated you, and how might you define success for yourself in this next stage? And then building upon that clarity to create your own set of decision criteria for your future exploration. The next chapter roadmap, you touch on all of those things, but have the added time and space to deeply investigate a specific opportunity that you're thinking about for societal contribution, and probably even iterating on a few different versions of that concept during the fellowship period. So you're leaving with a high degree of precision and confidence and an immediate set of next steps to move you forward. And then one last piece here. We want to be abundantly clear that we have always seen LSI as more than just a year. And in many ways, it is the post-fellowship community and engagement is equally important, if not even more so than the fellowship itself. So both pathways have access and invitation to that continued engagement. We refer to it as the LSI Alliance because it's so much more than just alumni. It is a group of purpose-driven leaders who are thinking with great intention, great purposefulness, and a high degree of, sort of action bias about how they can contribute to society at this stage. And so one of the things we're most excited about in having both pathways is that it will just grow this set of alliance members, and really we hope create kind of a flywheel effect of how we can further bolster and activate and catalyze this group of leaders. So with that, back to you, Seth.
Great. Thank you so much, Diana. I will say we are clearly with a very interesting branding. We're the place where fun comes to die. And then when you get here, you develop your eulogy values. So we'll have to talk with some people in comms about whether this is a very positive strategy for the university, but that's just a separate joke. All right, let's talk about timeline and details, get to your questions. The fellowship is for individuals who have 2 decades of senior level experience, significant accomplishment. Everyone at this university must have a willingness to engage in deep, rigorous, and respectful open exchange. We are the home of free expression. We believe if you come here, the point of learning is to experience discomfort and to hear views that you may disagree with. And so we really want people who want to do that respectfully and who are eager to hear from people that have different perspectives on issues. You should have a proven commitment to society that can take many different forms. We know many people have spent their career building incredible businesses. That is a major commitment to society, and there may be other ways that you're expressing it as well. And finally, that you have a compelling vision for how participation in this program will support a meaningful next chapter. Step 1 is quite straightforward. You just submit your resume or professional biography. That is a step where we're really just checking for eligibility, because it is a significant application where you're writing several essays and providing references that we call. And we want to make sure as you go into that process, maybe not having done this for 30 or 40 years, that you are confident that you meet the eligibility requirements before doing all of that work. Then you go through an interview. That is vital because the number one thing that we're focused on is building a cohort that has a composition that really is going to allow everyone to grow maximally. And we find the interview to be really helpful in that regard. There is a fee for the fellowship. It depends on which program you're in. Both are set consistent with the tuition base at the university. And we do offer financial assistance, especially for those who have accomplishment in areas where they may have had extraordinary achievement, but not necessarily the same wealth accumulation. Think of social sector, public sector, and other such backgrounds. And we want to make sure that we ultimately build a cohort that reflects all of the different varieties of achievement from the private sector all the way over to the arts. And so really want to make sure that we use our financial assistance to build that incredible cohort composition. And with that, we are at your questions. I do see them in the chat. And so I'm going to take down my screen. And I see the first question in here is about the deadline. The next candidacy deadline, as you'll see, is September 4th. I should acknowledge we have seen extraordinary interest. And so it is possible that by that next candidacy deadline, we will still be accepting individuals, but potentially extending invitations to the 2027 Imagine pathway. So if you're interested in starting this January, we strongly encourage you to start just by submitting your resume or CV now, so that you can make sure to be considered still while we have slots this upcoming year. The next question on here is the application process, and you'll see Diana's remarks there. So let me come to Nick Chow's comment. The program seems very focused on those in some form of retirement transition or approaching a form of retirement. Is the program appropriate for people who have achieved a certain level of leadership but may not yet be at that life stage? The answer is absolutely yes. And let me go to Matt, because I think it's fair to say, and Alice, I don't mean to put this on you, that while you are absolutely not retiring and you are very much engaging a whole next chapter of generativity, you are at a stage in your life where the alternative to this next chapter of generativity might have been retirement. And so there's some portion of the fellows that are in that camp. The other group, though, are people I think that very much resemble Matt. They sold their company way before you would typically be thinking about the R word, but that led them, while they were grateful for the influx of capital, to a surprise that suddenly, at I think 50 or so, Matt,
Yeah.
thinking about your next chapter. So maybe you can share and I just want to say Matt's story is one of many within the program. So go for it, Matt.
Yeah, so found myself at 50 years old, having sold a company, and spent roughly a year at home thinking about what I was going to do with my next chapter. And my wife of 28 years looked at me and she's like, "You gotta do something else." But retirement, I've never really thought about retirement. Retirement was never, an option for me. For me, it was more about I had this vision of putting purpose over profits, and going to the Leadership and Society Initiative and spending time there and really thinking through that is what, I guess enabled me to build Second Echelon. But I certainly am not at the life stage where I could where I would want to be fully retired. And so it was really, for me, it was just having had a military career and then an entrepreneurial career, where can I go to develop and think about that next career? And that's where LSI came in.
And let me just say the way we think about this, and I want to turn to you, Diana, which is that we believe retirement and this idea that you learn, you earn, and you retire is actually an outdated concept. We think of it as navigating a 60-year career, and there are just different chapters. And yes, for some people, this is a chapter where they may not be at 80 to 100 hours a week, and they may not quite be in their full warrior stage, but very much they are still in it. And the whole goal of LSI is to be activating people who want to take that vigor. And go for it, Diana.
That's exactly what I was going to say, which was just that, I think everyone here knows that because of increasing health spans and lifespans, we are all living through a paradigm shift of what, kind of I use air quotes, retirement can look like. And we see LSI and our fellows as very much as like a part of a much bigger movement. And we hope our fellows become role models and kind of early adopters of what this new stage of life can look like. And we see an evolving relationship to, like Seth was saying, kind of where work and where leadership factors in, and that consideration set is starting increasingly earlier for people who are looking ahead to these decades. And so we have fellows who do go on, to kind of big career moves. We also have those who build out portfolio lives and launch new things. And so it really is a very wide continuum. And we've seen that 3-part learning journey benefit all of them in different ways.
Well, we are at time. I will just close by saying yes to the question about could you be an Imagine and then Design fellow? At the same time, it is very much open-ended, and we anticipate most who do Imagine will receive enough from that they will be able to move forward. And so we are grateful to all of you for spending this time with us. I want to thank Matt and Alice for being role models among 22 incredible people and We are so grateful to show you off because we're so proud of the fellows and what you all are doing. And Diana for being the best visionary executive director on earth. We look forward, hopefully, to seeing many of you further as you decide whether to be candidates for this fellowship. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.